Welcome back to our Cool Club's headquarters here in Scottsdale. Today we are with our VP of R&D for S3 Technologies, Dr. Tom Mase. Welcome.
Jack.
And we are with our founder and CEO, Mark Timms. This is a very specific podcast. It is going to be helping us and you, the listener, to understand all about our robot testing. It's to cover all bases, to try and cover all questions that we might have. So we're going to start from the top. Show you the robot that we're using. It's out of our Sunridge Canyon location. Here it is on the screen. We call it Pepper because it peppers the pin or peppers the middle of the fairway, whichever way we want it to. And you can see the table down on the bottom there. That's how we adjust all of our heights and strike positions currently. So this robot is in use every single day at the moment, all day, every day.
A lot of new products out right now.
Lots of new products this time of year. But we're hoping it just stays in use all year round because we're going to do cool tests, right?
Yep, absolutely.
We've got 3 full-time engineers as it stands using that robot, going through very, very stringent test protocols and safety protocols so that they get consistent data out of it, basically. Then we talk about some constants of what we're using in the robot each time. So let's just go broad range, irons and drivers. What are our constants that we're using for, let's say, golf shaft, golf ball?
Well, for golf ball, we use the Pro V1. Actually, we use the TrackMan ball, right? The radar ball, because we do some TrackMan as well as Foresight on it. And for shafts and drivers, we use our Cool Club shafts made by Mitsubishi. It's basically a blue board, which everyone understands is kind of a very neutral shaft. And we use a 60-gram version of that in the driver shaft. In irons, we use a KBS 110. Primarily, so that's all constant, the same every time. We actually frequency match them and get the swing mix exactly right, and they're all like identical.
Yep, and that's shout out to Chris Ferguson there. He's our crazy scientist, mad scientist. he gets everything spot on for us.
Exactly. And then for launch monitors, we use GC Quad, obviously, and also some TrackMan stuff. And those are consistent. They say exactly the same spot each time. So everything is to do as much as we can to compare apples to apples. So everything's exactly the same. And Tom's in charge of kind of watching that.
Yes. Okay. So we've got who does it. We've got where we do it. We've got the stuff that we do it with. Now let's talk about the specific tests, and I want to go into the driver test first. So Mark, if you don't mind going through the names of the tests that we've got and the parameters that we're capturing for each test.
Yeah, so we do 2 tests. We do the same thing with irons and woods. But for woods, we do what we call a game improvement test or our standard player test. So we do 9 points around the face. They are 3/4 inch towards the toe, 3/4 inch towards the heel, 1/2 inch up and down. And we use all those different spots. And that's pretty simple. So we see where that's kind of where a lot of golfers hit it, all over the place. So, it's useful to know where those things are. And then for a tour test, obviously, which is more tour player, we just use the 4 spots right around the center. So 1/4 inch off center.
Yep, more of a diamond shape.
Yep.
We're not going so linear on that.
And that's a 95-mile-an-hour test. And the game improvement one, we do 95 miles an hour test as well. We're also going to do 110 miles an hour for better players to see what they do there.
So really the intention and why we've named them what we've named them. If you're a guy that's swinging around 95 miles an hour and you're a little erratic and you're hitting it all over the face, you want to pay attention to the game improvement test.
Right.
That's going to be most relative to you.
Yep.
If you're a good ball striker but you're still in that 95 speed, you're going to go to the tour test. That's going to be most relative to you.
Right.
And then we're going to fill in the gaps for those higher speed players.
Yep.
And we will touch just quickly the lower speed test. It doesn't change so much as the higher speed
No,
test
the reason
does.
we're going to go down 95 miles an hour is because you can go down lower than that, but it gives you the same numbers, just the numbers are all smaller because the distances are shorter, so it doesn't show us as much. So the 95 mile an hour test is good for, basically all golfers, 0 miles an hour to 110 or so.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's jump into irons, and it's a very similar thing. We're trying to keep our terminology consistent. So we've got a game improvement test, and we segmented the irons into game improvement. We've got a player's test for player's irons, and we've got a tour test for tour irons, and you can kind of give everyone an idea of maybe a little bit about the heads that are going to be in those categories and then the tests that we're going to perform on them.
Sure. So the game improvement stuff is all the bigger clubs, more forgiving, designed for helping people play better, basically. They're like the Callaway Great Big Berthas or, Ping's new G430, the big heads out there. The players category is a big category, right? Lots of things fit in there. They're not blades and they're not super game improvement. There's golfers that can be, scratch players can play a lot of those players clubs. Not scratch anymore, but I'm playing in the players clubs. But then they also can be, 18 handicaps, to tour players. So it's a big category, and a lot of stuff falls into that mode. And then the tour clubs are, forged and forged cavity backs, relatively small players. You really should be somewhere around scratch or close to it, or you're hurting yourself at that point.
So really what we're saying here is we're trying to make the tests logical for the players that are going to use them. Right. So again, a bit like the driver, if you're hitting the ball a bit more over the face and you know that you're in the bigger head, don't bother looking at the other test. Just go to the game improvement test on the head that's right for you.
Yep.
Players test is 80 miles an hour and 2 degrees down.
Right.
We do that because that's somewhat near the optimal angle of attack for that speed to produce decent ballistics at a 7 iron.
Yep, that's correct.
And players tests, we know, like you just said, we got really good players that are playing players.
Right,
clubs.
so we do both speeds of that. Yeah.
Right, both speeds. Yep. So the 90 mile an hour test is going to be 4 degrees down. But we're also doing both impact locations because better players aren't too concerned about hitting it 3/4 of an inch to the toe.
Right, especially good players who really want to see how your spin stays consistent and your distance stays consistent. The ranking we do, the performance ranking on irons, general, it looks at everything. But the tour ranking, the tour information is really, the better players hit it in the middle most of the time. They can keep consistency. So
yeah,
it's really looking at distance control more than it is, distance and forgiveness.
And the tour iron, if you're trying to look at shots all over the face, you shouldn't be playing probably a tour iron. So we'd really dial in that test in for that player that's looking at tour iron. What do they want to know to advise them on a purchase? And it's about centre strike and like you said, all the consistency parameters that are provided from our testing. So these are the tests we run, and I'm going to hold off on showing our parameters just yet. I want to throw it over to Dr. Tom Mase. I want to say, okay, we have got thousands of golf shots. You can see how many points on the face we've got. Times that by how many irons and drivers that we've got. We've got miscalculations from the machine. We've got odd golf balls. We've got all these outliers we've got to take into account, and we're hitting at least a minimum of 6 shots from each of these points on the golf club face. What do you do with that mountain of information?
That's right, Jack. And you think about just a driver test, and we're measuring on the GC quad like 30-some parameters there. You got ball speed, you got path, and all of that. We need to make sure that all of those are good numbers. And then 6 shots per location there. That comes out to one club driver test, like 2,500 data points that we have to sort through. We have to gain some confidence that all of these data points are good data points before we hand them over to Mark and the fitters to say, okay, these are the quality, this is quality data. They often call it data scrubbing. You're making sure you don't have any bad things in there.
And just to people out there, I think people have a connotation around that, and they're in a fitting, and the fitter sneakily deletes a shot, a good one or a bad one. That's not what we're doing. We are looking at the confidence of the data to say, are we performing an accurate test?
That's correct. We're using the statistics, looking for outliers, basically, is what data scrubbing is. And there's different ways of doing the outlier theories. There's the interquartile range and like a Z test. We're using a Grubbs test that uses a T distribution, and it's well accepted in the golf industry. And so we do it testing to a 95% confidence interval to say, okay, we're 95% sure that shot is in the mean for that data distribution. And so we go through that because of all those numbers. We've written a Python code that cranks through this, and that's how we distill it down and say, okay, these are the good mean values or average values. These are the good estimates on how much variation was there, and hand it over to Mark.
Yeah. So once we've got all that data, you actually do a really cool thing for us, and you plot charts. And I think that's when finally us normal humans can look at it and make some sense of it.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's like I always say, we're all visual learners, and if you look at just a giant spreadsheet that's up there with all those numbers, you can miss that something's amiss, but if you plot it, it looks good. So we plot the offline and the carry, and 6 shots each, and we fit an ellipse that captures how much spread apart those shots are.
Essentially, it's like a more intelligent. I say more intelligent. It's for use. A bit like you're seeing a fit-in and you're looking down range and you're seeing all of your shots collect on the driving range. We're producing that, but with some intention behind it.
That's correct, because we're fitting an ellipse to where those shots land, and then we have access to the area to where they went, so we can down the road perform quality. Say, oh, this was this many square yards landing area, and this club had this many square yards.
And what it's really forced from us is, we know that you do your due diligence, and we know our engineers do their due diligence in performing the test, but it really allows us to sit down and say, oh, is what we're seeing here, with our tribal knowledge, is what we're seeing here accurate? Are the clubs that are draw biased doing that? Are the clubs that are fade biased doing it? Are they doing the right thing off the face? So it gives us a chance, before we just throw out all this data, to mull it over and maybe perform retests, which we're at the point where we've had to do that multiple times at this point to create confidence in the data for us, for the manufacturer, and for the user, the end user here, which is going to be people trying to purchase clubs with the confidence that the information is correct.
That's right. We're not just testing. We're really going through that data and making sure it's good.
So on top of that, and the real key to all of this is helping people understand all of that data in the most simple way. Like, what is that going to do for my golf game, or what parameters that driver or iron are going to help me play better golf, right? That's the end game.
Yeah, so we kind of simplified it down. We've taken all this data and we put it into the format you got up here. Is are they draw biased or fade biased for drivers? How are they just how good are they offline, right to left, and how much distance do you lose when you just hit them, and then that's basically the numbers we give you.
So we've tried to condense it down because we don't want everyone to see 10,000 numbers.
No.
So let's run through the driver and the irons very quickly in terms of the factors or areas that we're going to highlight as key performance characteristics of each club. And then I'm going to let you go into some more depth and maybe show some of the bones behind these numbers.
Right. Well, shot shape really is it draw biased or fade biased? And the way we do that is we set up the driver and the swing path at zero pass, zero face, and we just see where the golf ball goes, right? So if it's a draw biased driver, it'll go left. If it's fade biased driver, goes right. And we kind of categorize that and give you a number. That's this one on the screen. It's 2.5 degrees left. You draw biased. There could be more than that. It could be fade biased. Could be a couple different things. And if you slice it, you want to look for draw biased clubs. And if you hook it a lot, you want to look for fade biased clubs. So that's a way to look at those.
Perfect.
The outline performance rating is basically how far offline it goes. They got two groups of people there. Ones that are looking for the longest driver that you don't give up much distance, and one that's looking for straight. So we put both of those ratings up. It basically is the accuracy right to left, and it's how much distance you lose. And that may be, different in some cases on some drivers, and that gives people an opportunity to pick what's their real look for. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to hit as straight as possible, or are they really looking for distance?
Yeah.
Yep. And then obviously spin launch is just it's a relative number, right? So, and this is relative to the speed. It's basically as we hit a shot in the center, how much does it spin consistently, right? So 245 is actually, it averages 2,500 RPMs. And that's just 245 RPMs per degree of launch, right? So if you get an 11-degree driver, it spins a bunch. You'd expect that, right? But you might have a driver that says 9 on it that actually measures 11. And so it's relative to each other which ones spin more. So if you're a high spin player and you worry about too much spin, get fitted or something, you might look for the lower numbers on that group. And if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of speed or hits up on it a lot, you don't have enough spin, you might want a higher number spin launch.
Yeah, so it really is no good or bad in that arena. And for any of these things, right, it's really, how is it applicable to your game? That's what we're trying to say. Exactly. So you can filter these things out yourself. Let's jump into the irons. Pretty simple one, carry yardage. Center hit, carry.
Right.
And then a very similar thing with the irons, but we'll talk about, there's going to be some variations of this test.
Yeah, we do a performance rating, and we'll kind of run through what that is. It's based on basically how much offline it is when you miss hit it off center. Also looks at distance and some other things. What's the average player looking for in an iron? Yeah. And that's what that number is. We'll do a tour one as well, and that looks at some different numbers, which we'll review in a second. Which really looks at, if you're mishitting it, but not much off center, so close to the center, how consistent is your distance and how consistent is your spin?
Yeah. Well, those two players have very different needs. You've got a game improvement player. I need the ball to get up in the air. I might want it to draw a little bit. I want it to go as far as possible. And you've got a tour player, club, who I want spin consistency, I want disc consistency, I want it lots of
They're
different
not so
things.
worried about distance. They're worried about consistency.
So just look, when you're looking at those
Different
numbers, they are two very different parameters that we're looking at.
And then we have stopping power, which is based on land angle and spin rate. That's really important to some people. You might get a great club for distance, but if it doesn't stop, does that necessarily do any good? So you got to look at both those numbers. And then spin launch again is relative to all the different clubs in the group. And if you need more spin to keep it in the air more, great. If you're playing in the wind a lot and you want a lower spinning iron to control it better, then you might look for a lower number there.
Yeah, I like to think of that number in the iron at least as the initial ball flight view. The higher that spin launch number, you're going to see the ball pop off the face and okay,
rise.
It's up.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's go a little deeper here now, and let's have you run through some of the harder numbers to look at.
Yeah, I'm going to run through this and have Tom explain the first bunch of numbers because there's tons of them. So basically what we get from our foresight is a bunch of numbers, right? So hundreds of thousands of data points.
This is the raw data. We always save the raw data after we process it.
And this goes on forever and ever in every direction, pretty
Right.
much. I mean, it's just endless. Yep.
And then so we calculate basic statistics, standard deviation for all the locations. The MCI is the mean confidence interval, 95%. That's another measure of the variance of the shots. The outliers, every time the Grubbs test comes up with an outlier, I want to know what it is because I want to look back and have total look at and see what was an outlier in there. The outlier indices is just a way of the shot number of that one. It's just a good way, again, to go back through the data and really figure out what's going on.
Like an index.
And it's an index, so shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, and so that way. And then that gives us the mean data, and we say, okay, this is good data. This is, use these numbers, and then I turn it over to Mark, and I say, okay, these are the good numbers.
These numbers, and I just deal with these last group, right? Then I go to kind of analyzing all that data. So there's tons of data here. Obviously, it goes forever, but we've hidden a bunch of cells, and there's tons of stuff that we don't want to show everybody. But exactly how we calculate it. But this is how it's based on. So these are some of the important numbers we get. Obviously, ball speed, launch angle, backspin, tilt axis for spin, distance, all these numbers. And I take all those numbers and grind them down into what we call our performance test, which is our overall rating for irons. This is an iron sheet, by the way. We look at slightly different things for woods, but this is how we do it. So we look at our total carry distance. We look at ball speed as some of the parameters going into there. Launch angle, because most of these players want to see it get up in the air better. We look at the absolute value of how offline it is.
Just explain that, because I think that's a really simple one that you think, okay, I'm testing offline data. If you put offline data in it and you got one that goes 10 yards left and one that goes 10 yards right.
One's a positive, one's a negative number, they cancel. It's zero. It looks great.
It's a great club, right, so but it's really not.
Right. We just take the absolute value on how far offline it is and how far distance dropped off, basically. It's a distance drop-off number. And that we kind of combine and we do some math on that, and that's where we come up with our ratings. And we blanked out the numbers of what clubs these are, but these are all the different ratings that the math produces.
0 to 5 ratings, right?
Yeah, 0 to 5. And they're all good clubs for the most part, so they're all 4s in most of that category. We haven't seen any really horrible stuff yet from any of the major manufacturers.
Yeah.
They're just good.
And when you're looking at performance, a tour iron is not designed to perform in the same way that a game improvement iron is. So if you're going to see a different performance number or a lower performance number, it's just that maybe those irons are geared around
not as forgiving.
Something else.
Hit 3/4 off the toe might be bad on one of these clubs, but for a tour player, he might want to play that club because he never hits it there.
Exactly right.
Right. So then we do our tour testing stuff. Most of what that looks like is really distance, consistency, and spin. Right. So this is the spin consistency. We take the standard deviation, and that kind of changes the ratings on that. And then we get a number here that gives us, how consistent are these clubs. As you miss hit it off center, a 1/4 inch, right? So that's really what it's looking for. How consistent are they in distance? Not so much distance. It's not actually looking at distance at all, really.
Perfect.
And then we obviously get the distance numbers, which are just how far that thing carry on average in the center shots. Yep. You can look at that to see which one club is the longest. And then obviously stopping power. We're looking at landing angle here. That's pretty important for stopping, and also spin rate. And this is a percentage of spin rate because you lose a certain amount all the balls in the air. So it might start off at 5,000 RPMs. When it lands, it's a little less than that. And that's based on how long it's in the air and We do some other math on that. And that gives us a stopping power number. So, and then we obviously got our spin launch number.
Yep.
So if you want to compare all these clubs and look at them, and we'll have these on the sheets, obviously, those are the big 4 numbers you're looking at.
Yep.
That's how we explain them.
And I think this gives people a really good understanding of our process, our results, and finally is, understanding cool clubs, right? So our fitters are going to use this. They're going to give our clientele the best experience because we got the most, neutral
Right.
information possible geared towards what we think is interesting or useful data. And we're also going to open this up as best we can to the general public. So check out our Cool Clubs website. We're going to host a lot of it there. And our partner website, Golf Intelligence Agency, which is GIA.golf, is one of their main ones.
Right.
Head there, delve into all the information. And we don't know what you want to see just yet, right? As
Right,
a clientele.
exactly. So we'll probably end up doing some tests that people want to ask for. We did a test for Golf Digest recently, a stopping power of, a wedge on a 3/4 shot or something. Would be interesting to do some tests that the people want to know.
Feedback is great.
Stuff that we haven't thought of.
And this isn't the end, this is the beginning, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
So keep in touch with us, stay in tune with all of our social media, all of our websites. Thank you so much for you guys coming in and explaining all of this to everyone. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to this year being our best year yet.
Yep, thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, guys.